My name is Frank Straza with the Heritage School of Woodworking, and in this video I'm going to go over how to sharpen a card scraper. I think a sharp card scraper is one of the most useful things in the shop, enabling you to scrape unruly grain and figured woods and such. A dull scraper, probably the most useless thing in the shop. One fella said that a card scraper is to sandpaper what a word processor is to a typewriter. I find that to be very true. This is a great tool, but it's got to be sharp. There's two parts to sharpening a scraper. The first part is to file it, hone it, basically get a perfectly 90-degree sharpened edge. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that when I talk about sharpening, the definition of sharp is to have two highly polished surfaces coming together to infinity. Doesn't matter if those surfaces are at an angle, if they're 90 degrees. In this case, with a scraper, we want both of those surfaces, the face, the edge, to come together to 90 degrees, but we want it to be sharp. That's the first part to sharpening a scraper. The next part is to then burnish the edge. The burnisher here will form a burr, which forms a hook, which actually does the cutting. Let me talk about some of the tools that you'll need to sharpen a scraper. I've got just a regular mill file here, which we'll use to start working the edge. I've got a set of diamond stones, coarse, medium, and fine. And then an oil stone as well. We've got a burnisher, which we'll use for the second part of the sharpening. Along with the file, there's some ways to help hold the file 90 degrees, because what you want to do here, as I mentioned, is you want to make sure this edge is perfectly 90 degrees to the face. So I have here a saw jointer. It essentially holds the file in place to keep the file 90 degrees. It's used for jointing the top of hand saws and such, but it also works for scrapers. I don't know of any new makers making these. You can find this on the used market, or you can simply make your own. Just run a groove in a piece of wood like this and take your file and knock it in with a rubber mallet. And now we have, the file is now 90 degrees to the face there. So let's begin. The first step is I want to remove the old burr. Okay, so there's a burr on the face. This is what I'm referring to as the face, and this is the edge. Normally when I sharpen a scraper, I'll work both edges in the same sharpening, but in this video we'll just do one edge here. So I want to remove the old burr, and I'm going to come over here to the diamond stone, and I'm going to use the fine stone, which is all the way on my right here, and it's flush with the edge, so I can access the edge right here. I like to put a little bit of water on the stones, and that helps float away the metal particles. We're going to work the face just to remove the old burr. Now it's flat. I can feel there's no burr on the face. The next step is to file the edge perfectly square to the face, and that's where we'll use our little holder. You can do this freehand, you can make a holder, but we want to basically file this perfectly square. If you'll notice, I'm just going one direction with the file, because the file only cuts in one direction. Now I can see on here that the file, there's a scratch pattern right there. You can see very slightly there. There's some of the polish from the other previous sharpening. And then you can see right there, there's some scratches right there. If you catch it just right in the light, you can see that. We're going to work this. Now, if you can't see it, you can actually feel that you've gone enough with the file. I think this is the mistake that most people make when they're sharpening a scraper. They don't go enough with the file. Now, how do I know that I've gone enough other than visually looking and seeing that scratch pattern all along there? Well, when this edge meets the face, I'm going to feel a burr all along that edge. And sure enough, I feel a burr right there. Let's feel it on this side. I feel a burr as well. So I'm feeling that burr to make sure that that burr goes all along that edge. And I do. I've got the burr. Now let's take, again, we're going to go back to the stone here, and we're going to take that burr off using the fine stone on the face, like this. So that burr is a tactile indicator that we've gone enough with a particular grit, in this case the file. So now we've got to remove the scratches that the file put in there using the coarse diamond stone. I'm working at an angle to work across the stone, increasing the surface area of the tool. Again, I want to feel a burr. I feel a burr on both faces. Work the burr off on the fine stone. Again, the burr is a tactile indicator that we've gone enough on this particular grit. Let's go to the next grit. Now, one of the things here I want to do is I want to hold this perfectly 90 degrees. Now, if you don't know if you're holding it 90 degrees, sometimes what will happen is you'll get a burr on one side but not on the other. That could be, you might be leaning it like this. So we'll work it until we get a burr on both sides. But you can also just take a block of wood like this, hold it up against there, and work the whole thing back and forth. I don't like this method because the block just gets in the way, and I prefer to just, I can do it a little bit faster this way. And you can train your muscle memory to get it right at 90 degrees. Again, feel the burr. Let's take the burr away. And then we're going to go to the fine stone, 90 degrees, working it back and forth. Feeling the burr, take the burr off. So now what we've done is we have essentially sharpened this to perfect 90 degrees. What I like to do is go to the oil stone. This is a hard translucent oil stone. It's a natural quarried stone from Arkansas. I use a little 3-in-1 oil on the stone. And again, we'll work across the entire length of the stone at an angle. And you'll get a very subtle burr. And then we'll work the face. Now what we have here is we have a perfectly sharpened edge. We can test it on our thumbnail like this. So I'm going to take my thumb flat like this, take the scraper flat like this, and approach the scraper to my thumb, and it should catch it when it's flat. Okay, not up like this, but perfectly flat. It should catch that. Same thing here. We're catching it on my thumbnail just like that all along there. Now I know that this is perfectly 90 degrees. That concludes the first part of scraper sharpening. The scraper won't work just like this. It will just take off fine, really fine, almost dust. But this is very important before we go on to the next step. The next part to sharpening the scraper is burnishing the edge. And I want to start by burnishing the face, which is right here. I'm going to burnish this face and this face right here. What that does is it essentially pulls the steel up like this. So we'll start by working the burnisher. The burnisher is basically a hardened piece of steel. It's round, it's also polished, and we'll start by working the face. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure right here, right along this edge, and we'll work it starting right about there and moving this way off the edge. You can hear the amount of pressure that I'm putting just by the ticking sound. This is also referred to as ticking the edge. Speeding up, you can see how this works. We'll work that about 10 times on that face. Flip it over, work it about 10 times on this face. Okay, so now what we have here is we've got the steel, it's drawn up like this. The next step is to start out at 90 degrees with the burnisher and move to about 5 degrees in this direction, rolling it back 5 degrees then in this direction as well. If you go too far, you'll end up with a weakened burr and it won't cut effectively. You must only go about 5 degrees. You can even go 3 degrees. It's just very subtle rolling there. So I like to just stick this in the corner of the bench, flexing the steel a little bit. Bring the burnisher down, right down to the edge right there, and putting pressure this way against the edge. We'll work this up 90 degrees about 10 times or so. You can actually feel it smooth out. And then we'll just take this and roll it 5 degrees this way. So I'm rolling it 5 degrees this way, and then we're going to roll it 5 degrees back this way. Okay, now what I've got is I've got a burr, and that burr is actually going to do the cutting. Now, if the scraper becomes dull, you can go about 3 times back with the burnisher, working on the face, both faces, and reburnishing the edge. About 3 times before you have to go back to the whole file and the sharpening stones. Let's see if the scraper works. I've got a piece of curly walnut here, something that would be very difficult to plane, and you can see the scraper works perfectly, no tear out, and it makes beautiful shavings and leaves just a beautifully smooth finish. That concludes this video on sharpening a scraper. Please check back for future videos on how to use a scraper.